They say every antique in Aberdeen has a story. I'm a photographer, documenting Hong Kong's disappearing trades, and I thought the stories were just metaphors. But last month, I found a story that was still breathing. A story with porcelain skin and glass eyes that watched me back. It began on a rainy Tuesday, chasing the last light over the Aberdeen fishing boats, when I found a shop that shouldn't have been there, selling memories that were too alive to be contained in objects. The shop was tucked between a fish market and a closed restaurant, its windows filled with porcelain dolls in traditional Chinese dresses. What caught my eye was one particular doll. Her face was too detailed, her expression too knowing. The shopkeeper, an old man with fingers stained with tea and paint, said she was special, almost as if he wanted to be rid of her. That night in my apartment, I placed the doll on my bookshelf. Her glass eyes seemed to follow me around the room. I told myself it was a trick of the light. But when I developed my photos from the day, in every shot of the shop, the dolls' heads were turned at slightly different angles, as if they'd moved when I wasn't looking. The shopkeeper was in none of the photos, though I clearly remembered him standing right beside me. The first change was subtle. I woke to find the doll facing a different direction. Then my things started moving. A hairbrush here, a book there. I blamed my own forgetfulness until I found the doll holding my grandmother's missing locket. Her porcelain fingers were warm to the touch. That's when I noticed her expression had changed. The faint smile had tightened. The eyes seemed more focused. She was learning my habits, my space, my life. I returned to Aberdeen to find the shop, but the space between the fish market and restaurant was just a brick wall. No door, no windows. The restaurant owner said nobody had been there for years. It burned down in the 60s with the owner inside. He showed me an old photo, and my blood ran cold. The shopkeeper from my memory was the same man who died 50 years ago. In the photo, he held the exact doll I now owned. The doll began appearing in my dreams, not as a doll, but as a living woman in 1960s clothing. She'd whisper in Cantonese, "He put me in here. Help me get out." I started sleepwalking, waking up arranging my things in patterns, circles of salt around my bed, furniture pushed against doors. My camera would show me moving through the apartment in my sleep, the doll clutched in my arms like a child. I researched the shop's history. Li Wei was a dollmaker who lost his daughter in 1963. The official report said fire, but locals whispered about something darker, that he'd found a way to preserve her soul in porcelain. The night his shop burned, 17 dolls were unaccounted for. Mine was one of them. Each was supposed to contain a fragment of his daughter's consciousness, waiting for a new body to inhabit. Other dolls started appearing in my life. I'd find them on my doorstep, in my studio, even in my car. They were all slightly different, but with the same knowing eyes. My friends said I was being haunted, but it felt more like being collected. The dolls were hurting me, closing off my escape routes, making my world smaller and smaller, until only they remained. I showed the doll to my grandmother, who still practices the old traditions. Her face went pale. "This is a soul vessel," she whispered. "Someone trapped a child's spirit in porcelain. She's trying to find her way home through you." She performed a cleansing ritual, but the doll just watched us, her smile seeming to mock our efforts. That night, all the lights in my apartment went out, and I heard a child singing in Cantonese. The singing became a constant presence, a nursery rhyme about a girl who lost her body. I hear it in elevators, through phone static, even in my dreams. My photos started developing with extra figures in them, shadowy children watching from corners. The doll began changing positions when I blinked, getting closer each time. I put her in a locked box, but she'd always be back on the shelf, her porcelain cold as death. I found historical records about Li Wei's daughter, Mei Ling. She wasn't just his daughter. She was a spiritual medium he used to communicate with the dead. When she died, he went mad with grief and found a way to bind her soul to her favorite doll. But the ritual required more. It needed other souls to sustain hers. The other 16 dolls each contained a sacrificed child's spirit, all feeding Mei Ling's consciousness. The dolls in my apartment started moving together, forming patterns on the floor, ancient symbols I recognized from Taoist rituals. They were preparing something, using my home as their temple. I tried to leave, but every time I reached for the door, I'd find myself back in my bedroom, the doll waiting on my pillow. She was learning to control my perception of reality. I tracked down a Taoist priest who specialized in bound spirits. He told me Mei Ling wasn't evil. She was terrified and alone, trapped for 60 years in porcelain. But her father's ritual had corrupted her, made her hunger for the living. She doesn't want to possess you, he said. She wants to wear you like a suit and find her father's spirit. The priest gave me a protective charm and instructions for a release ritual. But when I returned home, Mei Ling knew. The dolls had smashed everything, covering the walls in the same nursery rhyme she always sang. The charm burned to ash in my pocket. Her voice came from all the dolls at once. I don't want to be free. I want my father back. I discovered Li Wei hadn't died in the fire. He'd completed his ritual, transferring his own consciousness into another doll to be with his daughter forever. They were both still in Aberdeen, moving between vessels, waiting for the perfect host to give them physical form again. I wasn't being haunted. I was being courted as a new body for their twisted family. The dolls cornered me in my bathroom, their porcelain faces cracking to reveal something dark and moving beneath. Mei Ling's voice was no longer a child's. It was ancient, hungry. "We've been so lonely," she whispered through a dozen doll mouths. "You'll make such a good big brother." I smashed the dolls, but the pieces reassembled themselves, their smiles now furious. I found Li Wei's journal in university archives. His writings grew increasingly unhinged, detailing how he discovered ancient soul transfer techniques and experimented on street children before finally using his daughter. The last entry chilled me. Mei Ling is hungry again. We need 17 new vessels. The photographer has strong life energy. He will last us many years. The priest and I performed the ritual at the original shop's location. We brought all 17 dolls, arranging them in a protective circle. But we were too late. Mei Ling had grown too powerful. The dolls rose into the air, their porcelain cracking away to reveal the tormented spirits within. Li Wei's spirit appeared as a massive shadow, still protecting his daughter after all these years. The battle wasn't physical, it was spiritual. Mei Ling showed me her memories, the fear of being trapped in porcelain, the agony of needing life energy to survive, the loneliness of decades watching families through windows. She wasn't a monster. She was a victim of her father's love. But her suffering had twisted her into something that only knew how to take and consume. I realized we couldn't destroy them. We had to free them. The priest and I changed the ritual from banishment to release. We offered our own life energy to break the bond holding their souls. The dolls began to glow, the trapped children's spirits emerging as points of light. But Mei Ling resisted. She was afraid of what came after death. Having been trapped for so long, the release cost me dearly. I lost a year of memories and still see doll-like shadows in my peripheral vision. The priest says some bonds can never be fully broken. But Aberdeen feels different now, lighter. The antique shops don't watch me anymore, and the nursery rhyme has finally stopped. I visited Mei Ling's grave, a small neglected stone in Happy Valley. I bring her flowers now, telling her about the modern world she never saw. Sometimes I feel her presence, not as a threat, but as a curious child finally at peace. Her father rests beside her, their souls free from the porcelain prisons he created. My photography changed after that. I now capture spirits at peace, orbs of light at temples, contented ancestors and family shrines. The dolls taught me that not all ghosts are malicious. Some are just lost, waiting for someone to show them the way home. Eyes become that guide for other trapped spirits. I open a small studio in Aberdeen, helping people with spiritual problems. They find me through word of mouth, the photographer who talks to dolls. Most cases are simple, but sometimes I encounter another of Li Wei's creations. There were more than 17. He'd been experimenting for years before the fire. The work continues. If you're ever in Aberdeen and see a doll that seems too real, whose eyes follow you, just walk away. Or better yet, bring it to me. I know how to help them now. Some stories shouldn't be forgotten, and some spirits shouldn't be feared. They just need someone who understands that the line between object and soul is thinner than we think. The other 16 children's spirits found their families through my research. One by one, we located their descendants and performed proper funeral rites. Each time, I'd feel another weight lift, another set of eyes stop watching me. The last one, a boy named Assam, left just last week. My apartment finally feels like mine again. Last night, I dreamt of Mei Ling again. She was in a beautiful garden, playing with other children. She looked back at me and smiled, a real smile, not the porcelain imitation. "Thank you," she said. "Tell my story so others like me can find peace." So I am. This is why I survived, to be their voice. If you're ever in Aberdeen and see a doll that seems too real, whose eyes follow you, just walk away. Or better yet, bring it to me. I know how to help them now. Some stories shouldn't be forgotten, and some spirits shouldn't be feared. They just need someone who understands that the line between object and soul is thinner than we think. The fire department found me unconscious outside. They said an electrical fire destroyed everything. The dolls melted into grotesque shapes, their porcelain faces frozen in final screams. Li Wei's spirit vanished with his prison. But sometimes at night, I still hear porcelain fingers tapping at my window. And in every antique shop I pass, one doll always has her eyes, waiting, always waiting for me to make another mistake. Aberdeen is quiet now. The fishing boats come and go. Tourists take photos of the floating restaurants, and life continues. But I see the patterns now. The way certain shops appear and disappear, how some dolls watch you a little too intently. Li Wei's daughter is still out there in one of the 17 vessels, and she's learned from her failure. The next time she chooses a host, she won't be so easily defeated. some stories don't end. They just wait for the next chapter to begin.